we have been focused all along on two things. One, making sure that Israel can effectively defend itself, and that's an enduring commitment that's not going to go away. And also to try to make sure that October 7th never happens again. And in doing that, we're there as Israel's ally, as Israel's partner. We've also been determined from day one, that is, Israel takes steps necessary to defend itself to ensure that October 7th doesn't happen again, that civilians are protected, humanitarian assistance gets to those who need it. And these two objectives are not in conflict. The question is whether Israel, on the one hand, is and can effectively deal with its security needs and defending the country, while at the same time maximizing every possible effort to ensure that civilians are not harmed and that assistance gets to those who need it. And as I've said for some time, we see a gap between the intent and the result that we're determined every single day to close. We want to see the violence end. We want to see this get to a point where civilians are fully protected and people get what they need to get by and ultimately to rebuild their lives. The best path forward right now would be, of course, getting an agreement on hostages. That's what we're working on intensely every single day. With regard to Rafah, the President's been very clear about this repeatedly. What we've said to Israel is this: given the large number of civilians that are now in Rafah, many of them displaced from other parts of Gaza, about 1.4 million, we need to see a plan that will get civilians out of harm's way if there's to be a military operation in Rafah, and not only gets them out of harm's way, but also ensures that they have what they need, that they have shelter, that they have food, that they have medicine. We have not yet seen such a plan.
Let me try to push you a little bit more on these issues in the hope of getting an answer. President Biden, in his interview, also said he wouldn't suspend any military aid to Israel in a way that would impact, for example, the Iron Dome. Does that mean the United States would consider putting conditions on offensive weapons to Israel? Secondly, you met with EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell today. He said at UN, Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war. Do you agree with that? And if you don't, who do you think is responsible for the man-made famine in Gaza? And lastly, there has been an Israeli airstrike today on an UNRWA aid distribution center in Rafah. The agency said at least one staff has been killed. It also said that they've shared the coordinates of this facility with the Israeli army in the hope that it would be protected. What can you tell us about this incident? Thank you.
So let me take those questions. Actually, let me start with the last one. So I saw the reports of the strike today on the UNRWA facility. And first and foremost, our condolences go out to the families, the loved ones of those who apparently lost their lives in this strike. I don't know the details of what happened. I do know, based on what we've heard from the Israeli government, that the IDF is investigating, the Israeli Defense Forces are investigating this incident. And of course, we will look closely to see what that investigation produces. Without getting into the specifics of this incident, because again, I don't know the facts, I think it does, as a general matter, underscore something I talked about a few minutes ago, and that's the imperative of having much better and much more consistent deconfliction. Humanitarian workers, the agencies, they need to be able to do their jobs with as much security and as much confidence as is possible. And look, you're in a war zone. You have a terrorist group that is firing from hospitals, from schools, from apartment buildings, but the Israeli military, the Israeli government have a responsibility and an obligation to do everything possible to ensure that the humanitarians can do their jobs. And among other things, that means making sure that if there's a humanitarian facility that's clearly identified, it's not struck. It means making sure that if there's a supply mission, a convoy, trucks going to a particular place at a particular time, that the Israeli military does everything possible to ensure its secure passage. So this is an ongoing process. It's made, again, incredibly difficult by the environment in which it's being in which it's being conducted, but it is a responsibility and an imperative for the Israelis. What we've seen in terms of food as well as other supplies, going to the second part of your question, is, of course, the Israelis have been not only allowing food in, they have been working to make sure that it gets in and gets to people who need it. We've seen throughout this process. First, the opening of Rafah back in October. After my first visit to Israel, many hours of discussion, Rafah opened, assistance began to get in. We went back. Some weeks later, we got agreement to open Kerem Shalom. During the first pause, the hostage pause, 1 week, the amount of assistance that was then going in doubled during that period of time. Since then, we've pressed them on doing things like getting flour in from Ashdod. I mentioned that a short while ago. The flour that is now getting in to Gaza is enough to produce bread to last for 6 months in Gaza. We have a new opening that was just put in place that will facilitate more assistance going in. And of course, I talked about the maritime corridor that we're building. We've been doing airdrops. The bottom line is food is getting in, but it's insufficient. That's why we're talking about doing everything possible to maximize not only what gets in, but what gets to people. But I think that answers the second part of the question. And finally, look, let me just say this about our commitment. Our commitment is to make sure that Israel has the means to defend itself, to provide for its own security, and that's an enduring commitment.
I will take one more, Kyla.
Thank you. Hi, Secretary.
Welcome back.
Thank you, I appreciate it. You just said now, and the Biden administration has been saying for a while, that the onus is essentially on Israel to come up with a plan to protect the civilians in Rafah if they're going to conduct this operation. I just wonder if you guys think it's even possible for such a plan to be developed. Can they come, given how many civilians are there and what an operation would look like? Do you think that's in the realm of possibility? And then my second question, just in the same vein, is right now, without seeing that plan from Israel, is the administration considering conditioning some U.S. military support for Israel on whether or not they go ahead with this operation in Rafah?
I mentioned a few minutes ago the tremendous challenge in conducting a military operation in Rafah with 1.4 million civilians there. And the imperative, as we see it, and as President Biden has clearly expressed it, that there has to be, if there are going to be military operations in Rafah, a clear and implementable plan to get the civilians out of harm's way and to provide for them once out of harm's way. We have not seen that plan. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible, but we haven't seen it, and the most important thing is to see it and to make sure that it's something that can be implemented in a way that accomplishes what has to be accomplished, which is protecting people and supporting people. But right now, that's all in the realm of hypothetical because we haven't seen a plan. So we look to that. Beyond that, I'm not going to get into any other hypotheticals about Rafah or where that goes. All I can say is we need to see a plan for the civilians, and we'll wait for that.